Welcome back for another preview podcast in our AFCON Daily Digest series. I'm your host, Alasdair Howorth. Thanks so much for tuning in to our Group D preview podcast. Whether you're here after listening to every minute of every podcast, or you're just jumping ahead to hear about one individual team, we're happy to have you. If you want to get in touch, we can be found at OTW_podcast on Twitter and Instagram, and On The Whistle podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you get your pod. Group D kicks off with a fiery clash between the Nigerian Super Eagles and the Pharaohs of Egypt. To talk to us about why Nigeria made the decision to sack Gernot Rohr on the eve of the tournament, I was joined by Mimi Fawaz.
I think the writing was on the wall, especially after the loss to the Central African Republic in the World Cup qualifier at home in Lagos in front of the home crowds. And before that as well, they played Cape Verde and had drawn against them. So Central African Republic loss was, I think, writing on the wall for Gernot Rohr. Fans were very angry. And then when you looked at even the media, the way they described it, they were like losing a home to lowly ranked Central African Republic. So the language around it was pretty strong. And I think fans just got really fed up. When you watch them play in the last few World Cup qualifiers, it was very lackluster performance. And if you look at what a lot of the fans as well were saying, if you watch any of the games, it's what are the tactics? What exactly were the tactics that Gernot Rohr was doing? It wasn't the kind of football that the Nigerian football fans wanted to see. So I think from that match, days were numbered. And the Nigerian Federation President Ahmad, there'd been lots of talk that they were negotiating behind the scenes in terms of was there enough money to pay him off? Because don't forget, they were also owing him a few months' salary, and then as well they had some funds that they had to pay him off. So there was a lot of that negotiating going on behind the scenes. But I guess Ahmad, the Nigerian Football Federation president, decided it's better that we get rid of him now. We go into the Africa Cup of Nations and then try and build on it with the World Cup qualifiers for Africa, picking up again the playoffs in March. And the way they were playing, many fans were asking, Nigeria's at risk of not even qualifying for the World Cup with the performances that they had displayed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been rocky times, results against Sierra Leone as well in the last couple of years. Really,
absolutely. Yeah.
Really disappointing. But I mean, how do you think the kind of decision coming right on the eve of the AFCON, how do you think that will kind of impact the Nigeria, the Super Eagles? I mean, Austin Eguavoen has come in, who obviously took you guys to the semifinals, I think in 2006. How do you think that's kind of impacted preparations for the tournament?
Yeah, Austin Eguavoen 15 years ago took Nigeria all the way to third place finish in Egypt when he was former captain and coach at the time. So again, it's been, I think, a mixed bag. Some people have welcomed it, and others have been a bit like, they're not too sure about it. But I think the most important thing right now is, are Nigerians going to see tactics that they're happy about going into the Africa Cup of Nations, and just better style of play. So I think Austin Eguavoen, I'm sure he will try and put his own mark into it going into the Africa Cup of Nations. There's been lots of talk. We don't know officially yet that the NFF were going to appoint a coach, and they said Mourinho was somebody that had been thrown around that Ahmad said he had been consulting with. But we were promised that a coach would be announced this week, and it would not be a local-based coach, because Ahmad is in favor of a foreign-based coach again. So for now, Nigerian football fans are just going to wait to see what kind of tactics Austin Eguavoen is going to deploy for the Africa Cup of Nations, and they don't want to see what they had seen under Gernot Rohr, as you mentioned, against Sierra Leone, when Nigeria gave away a 4-goal lead, and a draw against Cape Verde, as I mentioned. And then the final straw was that loss at home to the Central African Republic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, hopefully they can kind of pull it together in terms of consistency, because when I look at the Super Eagles squad that's been selected for the AFCON, I mean, just is one of the best squads in Africa, and particularly that forward line is one of the best in the world. You have some of the players who are the most informed players in European football, Osimhen, Awoniyi, Iheanacho. I mean, looking at the squad, what jumps out to me though is this lack of balance. We have an unbelievable wealth of attacking talent. But then in the midfield, I think only kind of 4 or 5 guys were selected. And, one of them is, Joe Aribo, who's, attacking midfielder, Alex Iwobi, who's, hardly a midfielder. So how do you think that they're going to be able to balance this squad when it comes to AFCON?
Again, I think that exactly what you've said is what many Super Eagles football fans themselves have picked up. 5 midfielders. When I posted that squad list on my social media on Christmas Day, people were like, just 5 midfielders, 10 forwards on the list. And as many were saying, you win and lose in the midfield. So that's what Augustin Eguavon has gone with. Of course, as you mentioned, Joe Aribo doing very well at Rangers in Scotland, who is on that list in midfield, and as well as Wilfred Ndidi, who is a powerhouse for Nigeria, and as well for Leicester City in the middle of the park. So I think Nigeria are going to have to as well rely a lot on the forwards that they have. For example, Victor Osimhen, who is a talisman for Nigeria, is in fantastic form at the moment. He declared himself fit just a week or so ago.
I saw that
on Twitter. I'm sure you remember he had surgery in November after getting injured for his club Napoli in Serie A, and the club had announced that he would be away for up to 3 months, which would take him up to February. So it was a big surprise when he declared himself fit on Twitter, if his country wanted to select him last week. So you've got people like Victor Osimhen that they could turn to. You've also got Taiwo Awoniyi, who plays as well in Germany in the Bundesliga for Union Berlin. He's as well on great form at the moment. So it would be interesting to see players like him, Victor Osimhen, if he can continue. He's been great for Nigeria during the qualifiers, the World Cup qualifiers. And as well, Emmanuel Dennis of Watford, who has as well been on great form for Watford so far this season. I know they've had a few matches cancelled because of COVID-19 cases, but that was a name as well that a lot of Nigerians were wanted to see in that squad list, and he's been included in there. So we're going to wait. We're going to have to wait and see. I mean, how long is a piece of string? I can't tell you. That's the squad. Augustin Eguavon's gone with 5 midfielders in his squad list, and we're just going to have to see if he can really find that balance between attack and defense.
I think the final question I had in terms of the team was for observers coming from the outside. There's probably some confusion as to the inclusion of the likes of Odion Ighalo and Ahmed Musa, who are obviously 2 kind of giants of Nigerian football, but also are kind of players who probably past their best playing for smaller clubs in smaller leagues. Just how important are those 2, both to the squad in terms of the Super Eagles, but also to Nigerian fans and the kind of ethos around the team?
It's been quite mixed reaction, actually, especially when there was all the talk that Gunnar Rohr, before he was sacked, and the Nigerian Football Federation president Ahmad Pinnick wanted Ighalo back to be recalled, top scorer at the last Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt in 2019. I guess they wanted to get a bit of that extra support, I guess, up front. So they asked for Odion Ighalo to be put on that list, and I think Ahmed Musa is the captain, and I think it's more on a sentimental basis, probably, that they've put him on that list, and just to help maybe the morale of the team. But if you, as I said, if you look at the squad list, what they've got up front, even Kelechi Iheanacho, they've got, like as you said, so many quality players. We saw Kelechi Iheanacho, just this weekend doing so well in the Premier League. So it's Ighalo is just, I guess, maybe a backup if really needed. And Ahmed Musa, I think, is more the morale and being captain, and he's given so much to his country.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. I mean, looking at the AFCON with just a few days to go, with everything that's been going on with the Nigerian team, what do you think is kind of the expectations back home? Is it, we have an amazing team, we need to be going and competing with, Algeria and Senegal and kind of going for the title? Or is it, look, there's been a lot of chaos, we've got a good young team, we'll see how it goes, but we're building for the World Cup, we're building for the next AFCON?
Again, you pretty much answered the question in what you've just said. Just even by looking at the reaction from fans on my social media feed and even on the official pages of the Nigerian Football Federation, some of them are saying, you know, let's be serious. Is the preparations that great ahead of the Africa Cup of Nations? Are we really going to do that well? Some have doubts. Others are saying is just use it as a platform just to get ready for the World Cup qualifiers, playoffs for Africa, which take place again in March. So they just see it as a preparations. But some have no expectations. But when the tournament kicks off, come on, let's be honest. Everybody's going to be like,
always there.
Everybody is going to be expecting a lot from Nigeria. And we were seeing all these countries naming their squads ahead of the Africa Cup of Nations, naming friendlies with other countries, and Nigeria wasn't naming anything. Nigeria hasn't listed who they're going to be playing in a friendly ahead of the Africa Cup of Nations, whereas we've had other countries who've been announcing. It was only on Christmas Day that they announced the squad list, and then they said that they would be camping in Abuja, Nigeria, ahead of the tournament kicking off. So some fans may have mixed reaction that they're not expecting too much now, but honestly, once the tournament kicks off, people are going to be watching and expecting results. Don't get this wrong. Nigeria has quality, as you said, quality individual players, especially when you look at the attacking line. We're very strong, but it's really finding that balance between forwards, the middle of the park, and as well defensively, Nigeria as well needs to tighten up as well a bit on the back. So I think once the tournament kicks off, fans will be expecting Nigeria to definitely at least, the very least, replicate what they did coming third last time, or even going further.
Thanks to Mimi and for her insight. Next up, we had a familiar face join us. Ahmad Youssef, our in-house Egypt and North Africa expert, joined me to talk about Egypt's form coming into the Cup of Nations.
The last couple of years haven't been Egypt's best in terms of results on the national front, and you kind of wouldn't expect that with Mo Salah. The way he's excelling, you'd expect the national team to be improving a lot. But I think the team has struggled, and we've seen how we've gone through a number of managers recently as well, and none of them have really managed to kind of solidify some sort of playing style that has helped the team and also been accepted by a lot of the fans. But I think there is starting to come a lot of pressure on Salah to win something for Egypt. He's still got, I think, probably a couple more AFCONs to go, but there is a real pressure on him to kind of help Egypt with something, because it's been now over 10 years since we last won Continental Trophy, which it's quite a big deal for Egyptian fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you have probably the best player in the world playing for the team that is the AFCON, team, the pedigree is so high in Egypt in terms of winning this competition that the pressure must be immense. You're talking about kind of changing managers, and Carlos Queiroz has come in, just in September, obviously hugely experienced manager. First of all, why did he come in, and how has he done so far? He's had really little time to prepare for this with just a few games.
Yeah, I think if you look at Egypt's previous couple of managers, you had Hector Cooper, who helped Egypt get into the World Cup, but his playing style was very defensive, and I think that's actually in a way carried through. So we had Javier Aguirre and then most recently Badri. That same playing style that Cooper instilled into these players has continued, and it was a very negative playing style. It was holding the ball, holding the ball deep, and then having one long attacker, which usually is Mo Salah, and long balls over the top. It wasn't great for the fans, and you could scrape a result here and there. That's how we got into the World Cup, by scraping the results, but it didn't get us far. And I think now with Carlos Queiroz, you can sense a slight bit of change in the way that Egypt starts to play. It's a bit more free flowing, a bit more passy, passing football as opposed to just long balls over the top. Having said that, there are some games where you just kind of watch Egypt and you think, they still haven't improved in the last couple of years. But Egypt did definitely need a new manager. Badri seemed a bit clueless in what he was doing, and I mean, the results weren't even that bad, but he was, he had no real mindset or plan, and there was kind of discontent within, in the country, within the fans, about how he was playing. But yeah, as I said, Carlos Queiroz came in. He was the first manager to win his first 3 games in a row. He having said that, those performances weren't great, and there was clear work to do. And you can see now, especially in the Arab Cup last month, how he wants Egypt to play, and because he had a bit more of the youth players, the homegrown players in this tournament, you can see he was instilling a bit more of his style into that.
Yeah, I mean, just on the Arab Cup, obviously, it's a unique tournament that's only just come back. And, there's a sense of, is it, how much store do we put into it? And obviously Egypt got to the semi-final, but perhaps we're a bit disappointing in losing to Tunisia and, didn't beat Jordan, in 90 minutes. They had to use extra time. How much, looking at it as, a fan and a journalist, how much do you take away from that in terms of performances going into the AFCON?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty, pretty good reflection of what we'd expect from Egypt in the tournament, without Mo Salah, of course. And he's something that spilling that, adding on, he can add on to this team. But the team as a whole right now isn't the strongest it's been, and probably one of the weakest teams in the last 20 years, really, even pushing 30 years. And it kind of just shows, scraping results against, Lebanon is not something that Egyptian fans were happy about, and you expect to go into these games and be, given this is a homegrown, the team is full of homegrown players, and in the Egyptian league is one of the strongest in the Arab world. You do expect better, and the results were disappointing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it must be difficult to draw conclusions when you're missing your star player. But you said, Egypt has, going into the AFCON, one of the countries with the biggest homegrown quotas. Why do you think that the team is at quite a low ebb, despite having, probably one of your best players of all time in the side?
I think it's difficult. I think the team is kind of at a point where you have a lot of players who are in their 30s, and they should have been out of that squad 5 years ago, and there should have been a push for more younger players years ago. I think using, for example, Abdul Saeed, who's in his mid-30s, consistently, and he was too old in the World Cup, and he's still now playing in the squad. It shows that that's an opportunity for a new youthful player to be able to get into the squad and make a name for himself. But they're not being given these opportunities, and I think I also think a lot of Egypt's previous success, when it's been a purely homegrown kind of team, has been when it's all been like Ahli players or all been Zamalek players. And this time it's not really very strong or Ahli and Zamalek players, and there's a lot of fragmentation for different clubs, which we rarely see in Egypt, and that could be something to do with it. And historically, under Hassan Shaheta, Egypt was renowned for having really long camps before tournaments, and that was something that the EFA would help out with. Finish the league early, have a long break before, and I feel like now that's not necessarily the case. That obviously it's a bit difficult to do that, and especially with the amount of Egyptian players that play abroad. And I think we talked about how it's not just Salah. There's obviously Omar Marmoush, El Neni, and so there's a couple of others who don't start, but that are around the team who obviously also play abroad, and they're not being integrated very well in when they come in just a couple of a week before, and especially with COVID, it's not helping.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, getting on to Mo Salah, obviously it's he's a big conundrum in terms of the Egyptian squad, because he's probably the best player in the world right now, is kind of untouchable at Liverpool and has been so good for Egypt. But I do get a sense when I watch Egypt that there's almost an over-reliance on him. There's a desire just to, hit long balls to him, to play everything through him. And that's not his game. Even at Liverpool, not everything comes through him. He is lethal when he's on the ball, but he's not that kind of deep creative player. And he's obviously struggled for goals recently for the Egyptian side. I don't think he scored a goal in World Cup qualifying. So what do you think is the issue there around Salah, and how do you think Egypt can actually get the most out of him?
Yeah, I think more than any other sort of player, if you compare Egypt to like Senegal or Algeria, who they have Mahrez and Mane, but they don't have that same necessary reliance on them. And there's a lot of other players within that team that will take some of that weight and essentially draw players away from him, give that star player space, and also Mahrez and Mane are happy to kind of drop in, play as 10, play up top, play wide, whereas Salah's always fixed on that right side. And I think it makes it easier for opposition if they know where he's going to be they know if they kind of get an extra man on him, he's kind of out of the game. But also, it's weird because the other attackers that Egypt have are pretty good and are kind of highly rated. You've got Mustafa Mohammed, who's at Galatasaray, and he's just this week, Galatasaray have activated the buyout clause on him, and he's, I think, scored 8 goals in 16 league appearances in his first 16 league appearances since he joined this year. He's got a good record in a good league. And then, recently we've been out with Trezeguet for a whole year, essentially, with his ACL, and he's going to just about make the tournament. He probably won't start, but in general, there's a lot of competition for the other spots. But I don't think those players necessarily they're good players, but they're not players who are happy to just take that responsibility. But I also think, which is Egypt's biggest problem, is that the midfield behind aren't creative enough and aren't comfortable on the ball enough to be able to get the ball to Salah. And sometimes, you see when Egypt are playing, they're sitting back so deep that the defenders will get the ball and the midfield will just kind of hoof it long to Salah instead of being comfortable to play it around the middle and then find Salah. And I think that's kind of where he's been struggling. But hopefully, we haven't seen much of El-Neni. Where El-Neni wasn't at the Arab Cup, and then even in, I think, one of the last qualifiers, he wasn't even in the game. But when he's back, he'll give a bit of that comfort on the ball that Egypt does need. And sometimes I've been a bit critical of El-Neni, what he does, but one thing he does well is kind of he's a bit more composed on the ball and can find some outlets. But then the other two you have is Amr Soleil and Afsha from Ahli, who I just feel, if you compare them to the player, the midfielders of the early 2000s that Egypt had, are just not good enough, not clinical enough. And we saw Afsha at the Arab Cup, and the amount of chances he was missing was just kind of, you need, if you're going to play that cam role, you need to help out in terms of goals and assists.
Yeah, I think it's really tricky because you have some of these players who play super well for their club sides, but it's hard to judge how high that standard is. Even at a team like Al Ahly and Zamalek. I mean, looking at the tournament, there's a lot to going in Egypt's way in terms of some of the players, but there's a lot that hasn't been kicking on. What you as a fan, what are you looking at in terms of expectations for the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, there's definite hope for Egypt to go far, and I think anything can happen with Salah and with El-Neni and some of the other players coming in. But yeah, I think realistically, I think a good result for Egypt would be reaching the semi-final. I think there's just a lot of other better squads out there. Morocco, Algeria, Senegal, even Nigeria in the group look really, really good as well. And so I think a realistic target for Egypt is a semi-final. But I don't think we'll go further than that. I mean, I hope we do, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the tournament that Egypt have made their own over the years. So hopefully for your sake, they can do it again.
And you're right as well on that kind of point. You're historically going back, there's always been, in every tournament that Egypt won, there's always been a favourite. You had Ivory Coast, you had Cameroon, you had all these top players in Europe at the time, and we managed to make it work. So yeah, hopefully that happens.
From Egypt to their neighbours in the south, Sudan have had an interesting 2021. They started off brilliantly, qualifying for the Africa Cup of Nations, winning 3 games back-to-back that they had to win. But since then, they've struggled. They had a disappointing World Cup qualifying campaign before crashing out in the group stages in the Arab Cup. I was joined by Abdul Musa to explain why the Falcons of Jeddah have had such an up and down year.
So to begin, as you said, there was a very impressive AFCON qualifying campaign. I think there was a lot of stability around Sudan as a whole and around Sudanese football. The FA had everything. They had a plan for the African Cup of Nations qualifiers. They brought in Huber Veloud, which is a very good manager with a very good CV. I think he managed to stabilize things. Like he had a 23-man squad that he relied on mostly, and he had them for a very long time. So he managed to build something, and he managed to get results in the end. So winning the last 3 games against Ghana with a 1-0 with a last-minute winner in Sudan, I think that brought hope to everyone. That last-minute winner, I think that goal that Mohamed Abdulrahman scored against Ghana in Sudan, I think that brought hope to the whole nation. Everyone was behind the national team. Preparation was in place, a big plan was put in place. Money was spent. Like they went camping, they went to camps in Morocco. So a very good preparation was put in place for the rest of the qualifiers. Managed to beat Sao Tome away, and then the big game was against South Africa at home, and they produced. It was a very good performance. But as you said, since then everything has gone downhill. Like it's just part of the Sudanese mentality. They thought that everything was done. They thought that, yeah, we've managed to qualify. We beat Libya, qualified for the Arab Cup as well. That was part of the success. And then from there on, like they thought the job was done basically. Like not as much as importance. Like the national team went on to go. Every player went back to their team, back to their club. And like the national team barely came together for any camps, for any FIFA days since then. And I think that had a big effect. Also, the recent change in FA presidency, there was an election that happened, and then like everything, like all the news was just focused on that, and they forgot about the national team. And sadly, it's gone downhill with the recent World Cup qualifiers, with the Arab Cup results. It was humiliating, and it was just a complete capitulation for the national team and for Sudan as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. I mean, looking at the Arab Cup going into it, I think I would have seen, it's a tournament that, is growing and hasn't been, well thought of historically in the last couple of years. But, this year they put a lot of money into it, a lot of effort into it. And especially for Sudan, a team that has, many locally based players, it really seemed like a really great opportunity to have a proper, really competitive kind of essentially training camp before what is kind of your biggest tournament in almost 10 years in the AFCON. Why do you think, in terms of the performances, is it just down to the changes behind the scenes, or in terms of on the pitch, like what's gone wrong? Because, you got absolutely hammered by, Algeria and Egypt, probably two of the favorites of the tournaments. There's no shame in losing to them, but I guess maybe the manner in which it happened, and then obviously losing to Lebanon also on top of that was not great. So on the pitch, kind of what do you think has gone wrong?
I definitely agree. I think all parties are involved, even the players, the technical bench. It's not only what happened behind the scenes. Like if we watch the games closely that we played against Algeria and Egypt, as you said, they're big teams, but like even the basics of football weren't there in those games. Like how to defend, how to stand in defensive positions, like simple basic things that these players doing day in, day out wasn't there. It wasn't to see. Like losing 5-0 and 4-0, it was very strange. Like everybody was asking, is this the same players that beat South Africa? Is this the same team that went on to qualify for AFCON? Like we're still searching for answers, to be honest. We're still asking. Like the FA had a press conference yesterday to announce the departure of Hubert Veloud, and people were still asking why these performances, what's happened. So we're still trying to look for answers. But as you said, I think everybody's accountable for the humiliation in the Arab Cup. It was a very good opportunity for these players to showcase some talent, to try and perform on the big stage, in very good infrastructure, very good pitches, very good stadiums. Everything was in place, and it was a historical chance. I don't think they will qualify like anytime soon again for these kind of tournaments. Even the AFCON, we qualified now after 10 years. So they can't keep missing these opportunities. So it was a real shame, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to take, particularly on the eve of the tournament. But I mean, the FA has responded, very quickly in terms of, Hubert Veloud was sacked, and they brought in Borhan Tia, kind of a locally based guy. He's coached a lot in the Sudanese Premier League, where a lot of the players are coming from. Obviously, seeing that move, do you feel like that is a positive move in the right direction? They announced a provisional squad for the AFCON. So he's going to have quite, a lot of time to train with these guys, hopefully, and prepare. Do you think that's kind of the right move, kind of changing manager?
With Hubert Veloud, I think his contract was coming to an end at the end of this month or beginning of January anyway. But I like, for me, to be honest, like going with a Sudanese technical bench, it's never worked. Let's be honest, it's never worked. And now this guy has 27 days, and he's assembled a squad with 18 new faces, 18 players who have never played for the Sudanese national team before, taking them to a major tournament with only 27 days of preparation. For me, it sounds like a recipe for disaster, to be honest. Like, I think that he should have at least had 75% of the current team that were in Arab Cup, at least with their experience, probably the players that are the most ready for the tournament. Because the Sudanese League has also been stopped for like 45 days now, like 45 days or 2 months. It hasn't been on. Like, we haven't had the Sudanese League. So where has he got all these players from? Where are these 18 players coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry.
Hello?
Oh, sorry. The connection dropped
sorry
there.
about that.
No, you're good.
No
You're
worries.
good. Yeah, no, you're all right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as I was saying, so where are these new faces coming from? It sounds like it's a big risk, to be honest. It's not a time to build. It's not a time to bring in new players like a large capacity. Maybe you can bring in 4 or 5 different new faces, maybe try them out, see if they can cope with the current squad. But changing the squad in such a manner that he has is a big risk. And you're going into big games against Nigeria and Egypt with all of their stars. Like, this is going to be everyone who plays in Europe. So it's going to be as difficult as they get. To be honest, I don't expect much. I think we should just participate for pride, to be honest. Try and fight, try and like serve. Hello?
Oh, yeah, there we go. Sorry, it keeps dropping.
Try and serve Sudan as best as possible, and let's hope for the best.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to come into a tournament off the back of such a difficult situation. I mean, I guess the format of the competition is done kind of Sudan and some other teams a bit of a favor, because you're in probably one of the most difficult groups with both Nigeria and Egypt, 2 of the absolute heavyweights, both in the same group. But because of that kind of all important 3rd place kind of spot where you can kind of sneak into the next round, is there a sense that first match you're playing Guinea-Bissau, a team that, from a Sudanese perspective is one you can beat? Is there a sense that if we could just get across that, get through, the win there, then against Nigeria and Egypt, we do as well as we can, keep the score low, maybe nick a point? Is there kind of a sense that you can get through it even though you're in such a difficult group because of the format?
Well, I think, as you said, Guinea-Bissau is a game that we should look to win. Even though we had them in the World Cup qualifiers, they were part of the group and they beat us in Sudan, to be honest. So it's still a tough game. They have a lot of talent, but in major tournaments, if you're not able to beat teams like Guinea-Bissau, there's no point of being there, to be honest. I think Guinea-Bissau will have the same kind of vision, but when you're in a tough group and you have a third place chance of going through, you have to beat teams like Guinea-Bissau. It's a must. So with that game, maybe if things go in our way, you never know in football, they could get things right on the day, and hopefully they can get 3 points.
Hello?
Yep. So hopefully they can get 3 points in that game, and then from there on, they can maybe fight for a point in those games against Nigeria and Egypt. It seems impossible or near impossible, to be honest, especially with our recent performances. But as I said, you never know on the day. As long as you fight, as long as you're tactically disciplined, you're defending well, these are the main things that you need to do against these big teams. So hopefully, I hope they can get things right. And I hope if they manage, as I said, to beat Guinea-Bissau and then maybe nick a point, you never know. Or maybe even those 3 points could be enough if we don't lose heavily against the other two. If we don't lose heavily against Nigeria and Egypt, maybe the 3 points against Guinea-Bissau can be enough to go through. And I think just by going through to the next round, we would have probably exceeded expectations. And I think that would be a success for them.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the squad, Musa, because, the Sudanese team is a very locally based squad and is probably one of the squads that, listeners and viewers of the AFCON will be most unfamiliar with. Could you just pick out kind of 2, 3, 4 players that we should kind of be keeping an eye on going into the tournament, and kind of the players who've got Sudan to the tournament and will be the ones that pull them through it if they can get into that next round?
Well, there's a few familiar faces. For example, you've got Mohamed Abdul, he's the main striker for Sudan. He's the one that scored goals against Sao Tome, he scored against Ghana, and he scored against South Africa in the 3 main games in qualification. He was the one that came up with the goods. So he's the main striker. He's the guy that everyone will be relying on to try and get the goals in the tournament. Then, as I said, there's 18 new faces in this provisional squad. I know it's going to be cut down, but you've got also in midfield, you've got Walid Dean. He's a very good centre midfield. I think he'll be one of the box-to-box midfielders that Sudan will be relying on in midfield. Then, with regards to the new faces, there's also an exciting attacking midfielder, left-footed. His name's Al Sheikh Mohammed. He's one of the players that came up through the ranks at Al Hilal. So he's 21 years old at the moment. Very young, exciting talent. I'm quite happy that he's been included, and I hope he can make the 23-man squad. He's a kind of a number 10 attacking midfielder. Also, I hope that he can get some minutes in the tournament and showcase what he's got. So as I said, this is a stage for them to show what they've got, really, because this is like the world is watching. Not many watch the Sudanese league. So however good you perform there, it's not really recognizable, to be honest. But these major tournaments, you have to make yourself count, and you have to show what you have, and you have to help your country to get the results. So if you're not performing in these kind of tournaments, everything else becomes kind of useless, to be honest. So I hope they can perform on the day.
The final team, Group D, Guinea-Bissau, have qualified for only their third ever African Cup of Nations. But incredibly, it's their third time in a row, having also qualified in 2017 and 2019. I was joined by Eurico Costa, who shared the reasons behind their success.
Well, to be honest, I think there's been a great job done by the Guinean Federation, especially with Basiru Kande at the helm. He's taken over in January 2017, and since then he obviously, as you said, took them to 3 straight AFCON appearances set in 2017, 2019, and now 2021. So it's been a pretty good ride for them, mostly and mostly in that new generation. Of course, there's a project which bases itself on collecting players from playing in the diaspora, Major League Portugal, I would say. And there are Guinean players or players with Guinean heritage all over Europe, so they're basing themselves on that group of players, and they've made a pretty solid core of players as well. So they have a pretty good team now.
Yeah, there seems to be quite a lot of continuity kind of in the building of the squad. And like you said, Basiru Kande has been there for, a number of years, and he was there even, in the early 2000s for a number of years. So he's really been around that setup. And, in your opinion, do you think that idea of, relying on the diaspora, obviously Guinea-Bissau is quite interesting because they have a lot of diaspora in Portugal and France. So do you think that, that tactic of relying on a lot of diaspora is a good one and it's working out?
Well, in their context, I think it is. I think it is because football in Guinea-Bissau and Cabo Verde, especially, I'll talk about those two because they're very close countries. They are. It's not that much. It's not pretty rich, to be honest. Their clubs are operate in a very small championship, so. Qualification for CAF competitions even is not as we don't see that as often as well. So I don't think we've ever seen it, to be honest. I don't think there's ever been a Guinea-Bissau club in the Champions League. So that's major. That's mostly why the Guinean Federation is looking for players in the diaspora to play for the national team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, looking at the team, who, I look at the team as mainly guys based, in the second division of Portugal, a couple in France. Who are the guys who are the kind of standout players that we should be looking at during the AFCON?
Well, there's a personal favorite for me. It's Moreto Kasama. He's a midfielder for Reims in Liga. Yeah, he's really, really good. Press resistant orchestrator for them. And I'm really, really looking forward to see him. He's a very, very pleasing player to watch, to be honest. I think we should have a lot of fun watching him play.
Excellent. And he plays in the center midfield. Sweet. And tactically, how do you think Guinea-Bissau are going to end up playing? Obviously, they have the one game against Sudan, a team that they're familiar with. They played them in the World Cup qualifiers, but also is of a similar level. But then obviously they've got the two big ones in Egypt and Nigeria. How do you think they're going to actually set up in the tournament?
Well, they usually go for 4-2-3-1. So I think and especially Basiru Kande for especially him, I think he'll stick to the winning recipe. He's been, but always depending on players, he can always switch it up, especially in the. You mentioned the Sudan game. He went for 3-4-3, but with the players he has at the moment and the depth he has, especially in midfield, there are a lot of most of the key players, most of the best players for Guinea-Bissau are actually midfielders. You have Alpha Semedo, Muretu Kasama, also Panuche Kamara, Pele, who played for Monaco a couple of seasons. I think he'll base the team or the starting 11 based around these players. So expect to see a midfield 3 especially, or 3-5-2. I think I'll go for that. Yeah, I think that's something he would rely on. Especially, that's it. It's at least it is recommendable for him to rely on such key players.
And in their last games, they obviously did really well to qualify for the tournament. Coming second to Senegal and coming out of Congo, but in the World Cup qualifiers, they really struggled to score goals. I think they only got 5 in 6 games, and they still came second. And came ahead of quite a strong Guinean, Guinea-Conakry side, and as well as Sudan, who are in their group. If they're gonna get goals, who do you think is gonna be the guy who's gonna provide those?
Well, there is a lot of buzz around Frederic Mendy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's he plays for Vitória de Setúbal. Also Jorginho, who played for CSKA Sofia a couple of seasons ago. But I think their main threat in terms of goal scoring is Piketty. He's a winger, very lively winger, to be honest. He played, he stood out for me in the 2017 AFCON. Yeah, he's a very, very active winger, and I think actually he is the highest, their active top goal scorer at the moment. He is the active Guinea-Bissau international with most goals, with 7. So I think he should not be exactly the reference, but I think he'll be their main threat in terms of chance creation and also goal scoring.
Yeah, I mean, I want to look at the group now, because like we mentioned, they've got Sudan, who they're more familiar with, and Egypt and Nigeria. When you look at that group, obviously with the changing of the format in 2019, now the third place team can qualify. What do you think the hopes are in terms of getting through to the next stage for Guinea-Bissau? Is it just kind of sneaking into that third place by beating Sudan, or do you think that they can actually kind of compete and push Egypt and Nigeria?
If they can keep it, I think if they can keep it pretty solid at the back, in which I know they can, because looking at the results, they've held Cameroon in both games, and actually the past 2 AFCONs, they held Cameroon down pretty well, and surprised Gabon in the opening day of the 2017 AFCON, holding them down to a 1-1 draw. So I think defensively they can be a pretty solid side, and adding to that, and adding to the individual quality that has appeared in the recent call-up, especially for this one. I I think we could expect a surprise or two from them. It's not something I would say it's certain, but we should be hopeful for that. And Egypt and Nigeria should not be complacent when playing against them, because they can give a good fight against stronger teams. They always do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we know, Egypt are not at their strongest moment,
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
Nigeria,
and Nigeria is going through a transition, and
absolutely.
So they can pretty much win Sudan. So yeah, even though Sudan's team is quite strong as well, I mean, they can make it tight and they can sneak in either in second or as a third best place team.
Will the Super Eagles put their troubles behind them and dominate in Group D? Will Egypt learn to be a team not built by Salah, but instead built around him? Or will the underdogs Sudan and Guinea-Bissau pull off an upset that we all know they're perfectly capable of doing? Let us know what you think, and please do get in touch with us and leave us a review. That's all from us here on The Whistle. Goodbye.